Revenge with Karen.
Lisa, you're not cut out for leadership, Dean said, laughing into his Bluetooth headset like it was amateur hour at a stand-up show. She's great at follow-through. But vision? Nah, not everyone's meant to lead. The call was still active, 4 VPs, 1 director, and a C-suite name I wasn't supposed to know were all on the line. No one said a word in my defense, just the crackle of awkward silence before someone cleared their throat and pivoted to Q4 numbers like I hadn't just been publicly gut-punched. I didn't log off. I smiled at my muted webcam and let the heat in my cheeks burn itself out. Then I turned off my camera, stared at the peeling corner of the post-it I'd stuck to my monitor, "Don't let him rent space in your head," and opened a blank Excel sheet. That was the moment something snapped. Not loudly, not theatrically, quietly. Like when your favorite mug gets a hairline fracture, still holds coffee, but one day it'll split clean in two and no one will be surprised. And hey, if you're still listening by this point, do us a favor and tap subscribe and like. 95% of folks forget to, but it keeps the stories coming and gives a little karmic justice boost to our underdogs. Lisa would appreciate it. Trust me, back to the fracture. You have to understand, this wasn't a one-time thing. Dean had been performing Lisa erasure since the day I made the mistake of making him look good in front of the COO. That was 2 years ago. He'd parrot my talking points in meetings, then loop me in after decisions were made. He once took a project I'd built from scratch, compliance roadmap, client onboarding process, full implementation plan, and credited it to team effort in a quarterly wrap-up email. The only team was me and my 2 a.m. heartburn. My name was never on the decks. My insights, phrased better and quoted from his mouth. My actual leadership, repackaged as strong project support. I was the cleanup crew with a smile, and I took it, because that's what you're taught, right? Keep your head down, work hard, be a team player. Promotions will come. Recognition will arrive. Spoiler, they don't, especially not when someone like Dean figures out you're the one holding the Jenga tower together, and that if he smiles pretty and spins jargon fast, people won't notice he's pulling blocks from the bottom. By the time that call ended, I wasn't sad. I wasn't even angry. I was awake. You ever watch someone sleepwalk into traffic and think, oh hell no, that ain't gonna be me? That was me, that day, staring at that stupid blinking cursor in Excel and realizing the only person who could fix this was the one Dean just tried to humiliate. I didn't tell anyone, not even Kelly from legal, who always accidentally microwaved her salmon lunch right before our team meetings. I kept showing up, smiling, fixing the broken decks, running the numbers, catching the billing errors before clients did. My job, as always, was to make Dean look competent. Except now, I had a private folder. It was titled July Garden Club, because Dean never looked at anything that didn't sound like a country club invite. Inside, email chains, document versions with timestamps, slide decks with my comments tracked in red, client feedback flagged with my initials, a map of my labor buried under his shine. I also started flagging phone calls with one of our vendors, a certain recruiter from a competitor who'd left our firm 3 years back. Met for coffee twice. Nothing formal, just shared frustrations, polite compliments, and once, and if you ever wanted to explore new opportunities, that hung in the air like the scent of jasmine on a warm night. Back at work, Dean strutted into meetings like he was auditioning for a leadership podcast. His buzzword du jour was scalability. Everything needed to scale. Our team, our processes, our client pipeline. I smiled, nodded, took notes, all the while thinking, the only thing scaling here is your arrogance, buddy. He didn't notice. That's the thing about guys like Dean, they never see you unless you're clapping for them. He was too busy polishing his Q4 projections and casually mentioning performance-based incentives on calls where the CFO lingered long enough to make it awkward. He was preparing for a big payday. And I was preparing for my exit, quietly, neatly, with every thread in place. Because the thing about being invisible for so long is, when you finally decide to stand up, no one sees the storm coming. Not until it's too damn late. 2 days after the leadership call, I walked into the break room and froze mid-reach for the coffee pot. Dean was in the corner, voice low but cocky, talking to Tyler from finance, one of those guys who wears loafers with no socks and calls every woman boss lady. $890K, man, these numbers hold, I'll clear it easy, Dean whispered, smug enough to chew the air. Client retention's up, onboarding time slashed, even compliance is looking sexy. Q4 is gonna write my ticket. I didn't move, just stood there pretending to read the side of a Splenda packet while something cold and electric slid down my spine. Sexy compliance, retention, onboarding, those were my metrics. Every number he was quoting came from projects I'd run, built, and bled for. I had the stress rashes to prove it. Tyler chuckled, nice. What'd you say your strategy was again? Dean replied, good delegation, man. I make the vision, they make it happen. That's when I knew, not suspected. Knew. He was presenting my work, my deliverables, my relationships, my process maps as his vision. And not just internally, but to the people who controlled bonus structures. I didn't confront him. Not then. Not ever. Instead, I walked calmly back to my desk, opened my Q4 metrics file, and stared at the tab labeled Client Expansion. The top 3 accounts, Arbor Solutions, Helix Core, and Jensen Biotech, were all mine. I'd handled the first negotiation, built out the onboarding playbooks, and personally managed their quarterly growth plans. The next morning, I checked our shared team drive. My name had been stripped from the final decks. On the Arbor file, Dean had inserted a fake collaboration note, presented jointly by Dean C. and Strategic Ops, no mention of me. On the Helix Core summary, he'd cut my introductory section entirely, replacing it with a slide that just read high-level strategy, vision, right arrow execution. Cute, except my initials were still buried in the metadata. Rookie mistake. On a hunch, I checked the internal client comms archive. Follow-up notes I'd sent after meetings were all intact, but Dean had forwarded them to senior leadership under his own subject headers. He'd copied the content almost verbatim, only stripping my sign-off and slapping on his. I could have screamed, I could have cried, but all I did was blink, once, twice. Then I opened a new document in the July Garden Club folder and titled it Q4 Attribution Tampering. I wasn't angry anymore. I was cold, not the kind of cold that breaks things, the kind that preserves them, numb and focused like a surgeon before the first cut. I added screenshots of the original files, the altered versions, and the timestamps that showed my edit history. I started tracking forwarded emails with rewritten headers. Every time Dean presented at the Monday roundup, I noted which metrics he quoted and cross-referenced them with the original datasets I'd created. It wasn't petty. It was preservation. It was theft, plain and simple. Dean wasn't just stepping over me for a raise. He was rewriting my career like a plagiarist with an MBA. The stakes were no longer about credit or visibility. They were about reputation, about ownership, about making sure, when this house of lies collapsed, I had the blueprints to prove who built it. I reached out to one of my old contacts from Arbor Solutions, Debbie, the client lead. Hadn't spoken since their contract renewal, but I played it casual. Just wanted to check in, how's the implementation working out? She replied within 5 minutes, smooth as butter, still using your email templates for their weekly updates. Dean mentioned you've been promoted? Promoted, right. He was already spinning a narrative, probably positioning me as some grateful subordinate he'd mentored into obscurity. I stared at her message, smiled thinly, and typed back, Debbie, that means a lot. Then I saved the email. Folder, July Garden Club subfolder, external validation file, client attribution arbor. This wasn't a snub anymore. It was a hostile takeover of my work, my value, my name. But Dean forgot one thing: you can steal credit, but you can't fake impact, not when the numbers have fingerprints. And mine were all over them. The coffee shop was just far enough from downtown to feel like neutral ground, one of those hipster places with Edison bulbs and distressed brick walls that made you feel like you were sipping espresso inside a curated Pinterest board. I chose the table in the back corner, eyes on the door, back to the wall. Old habit from dealing with sales reps who love sneak attacks. Jared walked in 5 minutes late, smelling like cedarwood and ambition. He was a recruiter for Keystone and Locke, one of our fiercest competitors. Met once before a client summit where he dropped a line about looking out for rising stars. Back then, I'd smiled politely and walked away. Today, I waved him over. Lisa, he said, grinning like we were college buddies. I've been hearing your name more and more lately, from clients. I raised an eyebrow. Funny. My own manager seems to think I'm invisible. Jared leaned in, lowered his voice. That's exactly why we should talk. No resume, no pitch. Straight into it. He didn't waste time, and neither did I. Keystone was expanding fast. Their West Coast accounts had ballooned, but they lacked experienced implementation leads in the Midwest. I was the unicorn, technical enough to command respect, strategic enough to steer clients, and discreet enough to not make noise. Jared laid out the basics: title bump, salary increase, signing bonus. The only catch: you'd need to bring relationships, he said, during his coffee like it held secrets. Real ones, not just names on a spreadsheet. We want traction fast. You'd need to come in warm. I nodded, didn't flinch. He was asking if I could deliver clients, not just transfer but persuade. I built every single one of those relationships, I said. They didn't happen in some leadership workshop. Jared smiled. Good, think about it. You'd have support here. No dean types dragging you down. We didn't shake on it. Not yet, but as I walked out, the wind biting harder than I expected, I already knew what I'd do. Back home that night, I opened my laptop and created a new spreadsheet, one I wouldn't upload to any cloud, wouldn't save on the company drive. This one stayed local, personal. The title read, Exit Asset Client Loyalty Matrix, first column, client name, second column, deal volume last 12 months, third column, primary contact, fourth column, relationship strength 110, fifth column, transfer likelihood low/medium/high. I started with Arbor Solutions. Debbie would follow me to a submarine if I asked nicely. High volume, high loyalty, high transfer potential. Color green. Next was Jensen Biotech, strong relationship, but their CEO was a golfing buddy of Dean's. Yellow. Then Helix Core. Ah, sweet Helix Core. Team still forwarded my old sops like gospel. Green. I kept going until I had a full list, 26 clients. I color-coded the names with a highlighter, one by one. Green for loyal, yellow for conditional, red for corporate entanglements too deep to risk. When I finished, I stared at the sheet. It looked less like data and more like a war map. I folded the list carefully and slid it into a manila envelope. On the front, I scrawled 3 words in Sharpie, Exit Asset Confidential. Then I placed it in my fireproof lockbox, right next to my birth certificate and the deed to my mother's house. Because make no mistake, this list was more valuable than either. It wasn't a resignation yet, it was leverage. I didn't fantasize about revenge. I wasn't planning a dramatic walkout, no screw you speech. That's the stuff of bad movies. No, what I wanted was cleaner. Sharper. I wanted the moment where Dean sat in his glass office, staring at an empty chair across the conference table, realizing too late that the engine was gone. The relationships, gone. The performance metrics, gone. The quiet fixer who made him look like a visionary, gone. And all without a single slammed door. That night, I slept better than I had in months, because I wasn't reacting anymore. I was preparing, and walked into the Monday meeting like he'd just been knighted by the queen of corporate bullshit. Hair slicked, teeth bared, ego inflated to full capacity. He slapped a stack of folders on the conference table like he was unveiling the 10 Commandments. Lisa, he said, stretching my name like chewing gum. Last-minute client pivot on the Jensen rollout. They need a new implementation framework by Wednesday. You good with that? I glanced at the stack. Easily 20 hours of work, at least. Of course, I said, smiling like a porcelain doll. Happy to handle it. He nodded, smug. Let's see if you can manage this one without falling apart. No one laughed, but no one pushed back either. Just the usual polite keyboard clacks and studied silence. One of the junior analysts looked at me with something like sympathy. I didn't return it. Sympathy is what people offer right before they abandon ship. After the meeting, headed straight for the copy room. Not to make copies, just to scream internally for 30 seconds while the printer hummed like a disinterested therapist. That's when Clara found me. Clara from Data Ops, too smart to suck up, too quiet to get noticed. Hey, she said, looking over her shoulder, be careful, I blinked. With what? She stepped closer. He's teeing you up. The extra workload, the vague team concern he mentioned last week, it's a setup. Soft layoff. Probably, how do you know? She shrugged. Because he did it to Marcus. Same pattern. Overwhelm, isolate, document performance concerns. By the time HR gets involved, it's already framed. I nodded slowly. Thanks. Also, she added, eyes sharp, he was in finance last week asking about compensation protocols. He's trying to get a headcount reduction bonus. Of course he was. I smiled. Appreciate it, Clara. She slipped out like a ghost. I stood there staring at the copier tray, letting the weight of it settle. Dean was laying the groundwork, not just to erase me, but to make it look like it was my fault. I returned to my desk and pulled up my task manager. I logged every Jensen framework detail, timestamps, file creation, client edits. I even recorded the Zoom calls I led that week, not because I needed protection from failure, but because I needed proof of sabotage. 2 days later, HR called me in for what they called a temperature check. Jill from HR was trying her best to look non-threatening in a cardigan that screamed, "I don't want to be here either." She smiled with all her teeth and none of her eyes. "Lisa, we just wanted to touch base." Dean's raised a few concerns about deliverable delays and some feedback about team dynamics. I tilted my head. "From which team members?" She coughed. "Well, it's more of a general pattern, really. Could you be more specific?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Because I've hit every deadline, handled 3 rollouts solo, and received direct thank you emails from Arbor and Helix Core this month." Jill shifted. "It's not disciplinary, just observational. I see, and I did. I saw everything now, the gloating, the fake concern, the vague HR flags. This wasn't about performance. It was about control, about pushing me out before I could push back. I left that meeting. I didn't cry in the bathroom. I didn't rant to friends over wine. I didn't rage quit on Slack. I booked a meeting with an employment attorney. Her name was Vanessa Price, and she came recommended by a quietly bitter ex-employee from our sister firm who'd walked away with a golden handshake and a 6-month NDA gag. Vanessa listened carefully while I laid it all out. Dean's theft of credit, the manipulated project decks, the scrubbing of my name, the soft layoff maneuver. She nodded once and said, "Build your file, date everything. Keep doing your job better than they expect, but document everything they don't." Then she smiled. "They're preparing for your funeral, but you're writing the autopsy." I left her office feeling oddly weightless. Not happy, not vindicated, just ready, because I knew what Dean didn't. You don't corner someone who builds the damn maze. Dean strutted through the office like a man who'd just solved capitalism. His suit was a little sharper, his laugh a little louder, and for the first time in 6 months, he treated the coffee machine like a confessional booth. Loud enough for everyone to hear, but just casual enough to pretend he wasn't bragging. "Just goes to show," he told no one and everyone, "leadership's about vision, not paperwork. You hire the right people, get out of their way, and collect the results." Simple. I was standing 15 feet away, dropping a carefully labeled binder into the file room return bin. If I clenched my jaw any tighter, I could have cracked a tooth. The bonus had cleared $890,000, nearly $1 million for 6 months of PowerPoint theft and inflated deliverables, most of which had my fingerprints all over them. And yet, there he was, reaping the rewards like a proud harvest mule. It wasn't rage that hit me, not even jealousy. It was something colder, cleaner, like watching a house catch fire when you already sold the land underneath it. Because what Dean didn't know, what no one in that building knew, was that my offer letter had arrived that morning. Keystone and Locke wanted me, badly. The recruiter, Jared, had followed up with a final number that made my eyebrows lift and my pulse slow. A salary bump, profit-sharing potential, and most importantly, $40K signing bonus contingent on 2 things: a clean resignation, a warm introduction to the clients I still had juice with. They didn't want a show. They wanted proof of influence. I sent back a 2-sentence acceptance. Then I did what I always did. I got to work. That afternoon, I scheduled a week's worth of client check-ins. Just touch points, nothing suspicious. I confirmed implementation milestones, slipped in casual compliments about how smoothly transitions would be under any future model, and sent thank you notes. Friendly, polished, airtight. Next, I returned to my July Garden Club folder, now fat with documentation, annotated screenshots, timelines, call logs, and backup folders. I printed 1 file, the cleaned-up client matrix. I printed 1 letter, my resignation. Plain white paper. No flourishes, no righteous quotes. Just my name, my departure date 2 weeks out per policy, and a single sentence thanking the company for the opportunity. Then I placed both, along with a labeled packet of key project documentation, into a navy blue folder and tucked it under my arm like a church pamphlet. I didn't leave it on Dean's desk. I left it with HR, because unlike Dean, I didn't need a stage. I walked past his office on the way out. He was on another call, probably bragging about scalability or synergy or whatever buzzword vomit he'd swallowed that day. I didn't stop, didn't wave, didn't make eye contact. I walked out of that building like it was any other day. But it wasn't. It was the last day Dean would walk through that office believing he was untouchable. Because in that folder was everything he didn't account for, the names of clients who trusted me, the timeline of projects I delivered, documentation showing exactly where my fingerprints ended and his didn't begin, all wrapped in polite professionalism. No fireworks, no raised voices, just facts, clean, cold, curated. Later that night, I poured a glass of wine, opened my laptop, and watched the final confirmation email land in my inbox. Welcome to Keystone and Lock. Start date, 2 weeks from today. My fingers hovered for a second before I typed out one more message. Not to Dean, not to HR. To 3 of my closest client contacts, green on the loyalty matrix. Hi, just wanted you to hear it from me. I've accepted an opportunity elsewhere and will be transitioning over the next 2 weeks. I'm grateful for the work we've done together. I'll be in touch with next steps soon. First one send. Second one send. Third send. Then I closed the laptop, leaned back, and let the silence settle. It didn't feel like an ending. Felt like pulling the pin from a grenade and gently placing it back in the box Dean kept calling Vision. Dean found the envelope on his desk Tuesday morning, wedged neatly between his overpriced desk cactus and a half-drunk bottle of smart water he'd been refilling with tap for weeks. He barely looked at the name. Lisa's handwriting was too neat, too careful, too beneath him. He slid a finger under the flap, pulled out the papers, gave a dismissive snort when the word resignation greeted him in 12-point calibri. Finally, he muttered, tossing the letter aside like it was an old receipt. Guess she wasn't cut out for the pressure. Then he noticed the second item in the folder. It was a list, not a dramatic farewell note, not some last-ditch email scorched with passive aggression. A list, titled simply, Client Transition Summary, Lisa R. The top page alone had 8 names, major clients, tier accounts, and some fringe renewals. But this wasn't just a handoff. Each name was followed by detailed annotations. Last project milestone completed, primary contacts loyalty index, color-coded, probability of client transfer within 90 days, notes from last calls and implementation strategy summaries, deal volumes, trailing 12 months, expansion potential. Low/medium/high, Dean furrowed his brow. Paper rustled louder with each page he turned. Green highlights for Arbor Solutions, yellow for Jensen Biotech, red for that one volatile pharma client he tried to schmooze and who still referred to him as the guy with the weak handshake. Every note was laser sharp. No fluff, no wasted space. It was the kind of document you build if you've already left, but you want the building to burn in your silhouette. He stopped flipping when he got to Helix Core. Client SOPs still follow Lisa's original template. Contact Debbie expects weekly cadence. Any change will trigger internal escalation. His smile cracked just slightly. Then came the real thunder. CFO Daniel Marston strolled in without knocking, holding a tablet in one hand and a protein shake in the other. He was halfway through a joke when he caught sight of the document in Dean's hands. What's that? Her exit paperwork. Dean smirked. Yeah, finally got sick of the pace, I guess. Marston set the shake down and reached for the packet. Dean hesitated a beat too long before handing it over. The CFO scanned the first 2 pages, then again, then slower. Wait, he said, voice flattening. These deals weren't yours. Dean shifted in his seat. What, these? The ones listed here. Arbor, Helix Core, Jensen, these were credited on your Q4 review. Right? Dean said quickly, team efforts. You know how it goes. Marston looked up. No, I don't. Because these annotations don't look like passive support. They look like project ownership. Dean chuckled, too loud. Look, she's just trying to stir the pot on the way out. You know how some folks get when they feel underappreciated. The CFO didn't smile. He tapped his tablet, pulling up the Q4 bonus justification report. Let's match this up. Office went quiet except for the soft clicking of touchscreen navigation and the rhythmic thud of Dean's heel tapping under the desk. Line by line, name by name, the data started peeling. Marston frowned. These revenue numbers, did you document who initiated the Arbor expansion? Dean shrugged. It came from my pipeline. No. According to this, the first contact was 6 months before that. Her notes, her email chain, her calendar invite. Dean tried to interrupt. The CFO held up a finger. In Helix Core, Lisa ran the whole post-acquisition transition. Why was that booked under your portfolio? It's how we file implementation. Marston's eyes narrowed. Not anymore, it's not. He dropped the papers on the desk. You padded your bonus packet with someone else's deals. Dean opened his mouth, but no words came out. Just a tiny gulp of air and whatever smug residue he'd been chewing on for weeks. Silence was broken only by the hum of the HVAC and the buzz of fluorescent lights. Outside the glass office walls, people typed, answered phones, and filled their water bottles. Normal, unaware, but inside, the walls had started to creak. Lisa's name hadn't just lingered, it haunted the margins now. She wasn't there, but her structure was. Her precision. Her trail of competence so meticulously clear it made Dean's own work look like it was scribbled in crayon. For the first time since she left, he realized he hadn't just lost an employee. He'd lost the scaffolding holding up the image he'd sold for $1 million, and someone had just started looking at the bolts. 3 days after my resignation, the audit team sent out their first round of calendar requests. Subject line: Client Attribution Review Q4 Compensation Evaluation. Dean's name was on every invite, so was mine. I wasn't in the building anymore, of course. But my work, the work he claimed as his own, was in every folder, every client update, every Slack thread he had repurposed for senior leadership. What he didn't know was that I'd blind copied our compliance officer on one final email before I left. No drama, no accusations, just a zipped folder titled Q4 Attribution Backup LR with read-only documentation and a polite message. In the interest of continuity, please find attached detailed documentation for client accounts and project deliverables associated with my tenure. For transparency, timestamps and version history are included. I sent it at 6:43 a.m. on my last day. Quietly. Before HR even had a chance to forward my goodbye template. Now it was center stage. The audit team moved fast, too fast for Dean to catch his footing. Word spread in half-hushed whispers. Lisa's file was airtight, chronological, cross-referenced. Even included voice memos from client calls where I was the only person from our side in the room. By Friday, I got a call from Jared, the recruiter at Keystone and Locke. "Hey," he said, laughing into the receiver, "you won't believe what just hit our inbox." "Try me." In spinning a narrative that you were, and I quote, "support staff with no measurable impact." I laughed, loud and full. "Seriously? Dead serious," Jared said. "You want us to forward the thank you letters from your clients?" Arbor's VP literally wrote a handwritten note about how you rescued their compliance timeline. "I've got those already," I said, in triplicate. There was a pause. Then Jared chuckled. "You're good, Lisa, real good." But I wasn't smiling when I hung up. I was watching, from a distance, from safety, from the office window of my new job, where I was already drafting onboarding blueprints for 2 clients Dean used to brag about at networking events. One had emailed me personally, "Heard you landed somewhere better. Let us know if you're taking new partners." Meanwhile, back in my old office, the paint was starting to peel. Dean's bonus, once a locked-in number he'd practically tattooed on his forehead, was now under formal review. Finance flagged discrepancies. Legal flagged exposure. Compliance flagged procedural gaps. He still walked the halls with his signature smirk, but it had started to curdle. A little too forced. A little too plastic. The kind of smile someone wears when they've realized the ground beneath them might be quicksand. Reports say he snapped during a team sync, slamming his fist on the table when someone asked who was handling the Helix Core backlogs now that Lisa was gone. "There's no backlog," he barked. Except there was, and I wasn't there to fix it. The cracks kept spreading. Jill from HR, the same one who'd pulled me into that temperature check a few weeks ago, was now being looped into legal reviews. Tyler from Finance, he of the no-sock loafers, was asked to recreate the timeline for Q4 billing. Most of his figures traced back to files with my initials. And the audit team? They were just getting started. I didn't gloat. I didn't text anyone "I told you so." I didn't even update my LinkedIn profile. There was no need. Because I had done what most people never do, I had made the invisible visible. Quietly, methodically, without begging to be seen. Dean once told me leadership was about vision, not paperwork. Turns out it's both. Mine had teeth. It happened on a Tuesday, mid-morning, mid-quarter, mid-lie. The CFO, Daniel Marston, kicked open the door to the 17th floor executive conference room like he was storming Omaha Beach. HR was already there, legal too. Nobody had coffee. That alone was a red flag. He didn't sit. He didn't greet. He just slapped a thick folder on the table and said, "Why were these deals attributed to Dean if they were initiated, negotiated, closed under Lisa's name?" Silence, then stammering. Then one of the HR directors attempted a soft pivot. "We were under the impression that Dean was supervising." Daniel cut her off. "Supervising? Then explain this." He flipped open the folder to reveal a printed email chain. "This is a signed client scope from Arbor Solutions. It's timestamped, logged from Lisa's email, with direct approval from their VP. Dean wasn't even CC'd. Another page flipped. There's Helix Core. Lisa created the onboarding strategy. Every deliverable maps back to her ticket history in Jira. Dean retroactively changed ownership tags in the file history a week before he submitted his bonus packet. He let that hang in the air like smoke from a grease fire. Legal cleared her throat. If the system logs confirm manual alteration of attribution data, we have a material misrepresentation issue, possibly more. Daniel nodded once. I want the internal auditor's full report on my desk by end of day. I've already seen a draft, legal added quietly. It recommends voluntary disclosure to the state regulator. And the SEC, the room shrank. Even the HVAC seemed to pause. Across the table, Jill from HR asked the question out loud no one wanted to ask. What does that mean for Dean? Daniel didn't blink. He's done. Pull him from all active accounts. Immediately. Suspend his access to comp systems. I want a meeting scheduled with Risk by noon. That's when the rumors started to bleed down the elevator shafts and into the cubicle trenches. Dean's access to Salesforce revoked. Client leads he used to bark orders at redirected to temporary managers. The morning stand-up that Dean usually ran canceled. By lunch, half the floor was whispering. The other half was pretending not to be refreshing Slack threads. Someone swore they saw Dean in a glass-walled meeting room arguing with HR, red-faced and pacing, hands slicing the air like he was cutting rope. He didn't come back to his desk after that. No one asked questions out loud. Not yet. But it didn't stop the messages from pinging quietly across back channels. You hear about Dean? Is it true Lisa had proof? What if the board finds out? They would. Because now the machine was moving on its own. Hadn't pushed the boulder down the hill. I had just placed it gently on the edge and walked away. What came next was gravity. That afternoon, I received a calendar invite. Subject, Client Transition Discussion Arbor Jensen Helix. Sender, my new firm. Included on the thread, 2 of the very clients Dean had used to build his bonus narrative. They were coming with me, smiling, voluntarily. Dean's reputation was unraveling thread by thread, each one yanked loose by the very names he once bragged about at cocktail mixers and offsites. I didn't send a message, didn't even gloat, but I did read the article that landed in our Industry Digest that night. Q4 Comp Integrity Review prompts internal controls audit at major SAS firm. No names. Not yet, but they would come, because truth has teeth, and mine were sharpened in silence. The boardroom was all glass, all tension, and all lies, polished to a shine. Dean sat at the far end of the table, back straight, chin high, still clinging to the last threads of charisma like they were Kevlar. A printout of the Q4 performance summary sat in front of him, double-spaced and freshly stapled. Beside it, a bottle of still water, untouched. CFO Daniel Marston's phone buzzed mid-session. Not a polite vibration, an urgent, insistent alert. He checked it, eyes narrowing. Then, without a word, he stood, left the room, returned 30 seconds later holding a navy folder, identical to the one I'd left with HR. He didn't toss it. He placed it on the table in front of Dean with the kind of gentle finality usually reserved for caskets. Get our lawyers on the phone, he said. Low, controlled. The room froze. Dean blinked. What is this? Marston didn't answer. He just flipped open the folder and turned it to face the board. The top sheet was the client transition list, mine. Clean, color-coded, date-stamped, irrefutable. The second page was a printout of an email chain from Arbor Solutions. My name in the from field, my calendar invite, my follow-up with attached deliverables. A CC to Dean 2 weeks after the deal was finalized. Then came Helix Core, Jensen Biotech, Novatherm. One by one, the same pattern. Initiation, Lisa R. Negotiation, Lisa R. Closure, Lisa R. Aftercare. Lisa R. Dean had slapped his name on every outcome like he'd just assumed the work showed up overnight, delivered by elves with MBA degrees. One board member leaned forward, glasses perched halfway down his nose, and muttered, "You stole from your own company to pad your bonus." No one corrected him, because it wasn't hyperbole. Dean opened his mouth, then closed it, again, and again, like he couldn't quite decide whether to deny, deflect, or just fake a stroke. The board didn't need his reaction. They had the receipts. The chairwoman tapped her pen against the table, once, twice. Until legal completes their review, Mr. Carson will be relieved of all managerial duties and placed under internal investigation. Effective immediately. That was it. No yelling, no dramatic exit. Just the quiet sound of $1 million lie collapsing under its own paperwork. And me, I wasn't there. I was 4 blocks away, in my new office. Window view, different skyline. Same city. Coffee in hand, inbox glowing. Debbie from Arbor had just messaged, "We're ready to talk expansion under your new shop. Let us know your availability. Then Jensen's legal team followed up. Then a thank you from Helix Core. Then a subject line that just said, "We miss your leadership." I didn't respond right away. I sat back, took a sip, and let it all unfold. No victory lap. No burn it down anthem. No gloating monologue about justice served. Just the sweet, echoing silence of a machine eating itself alive, one forged signature at a time. Dean once told me I wasn't cut out for leadership. Turns out, I was just out of his league. Thanks for joining the fun, you office survivors. Subscribe for more switch-flicking drama. Let's make your former coworkers sweat.